Shalom and welcome. This episode will cover from Shem to Melchizedek. I'm going to offer more evidence that Natufians and related populations are the ancestors of Semites and the descendants of Shem, and that the land Shem settled after the flood was the Levant, even before the Canaanites entered the land. So let's begin. There are many cultural parallels between Natufians and Semites. The early chapters in the book of Genesis are the best examples of this. In the book of Genesis, we read that Cain was an agriculturalist and Abel was a pastoralist.
And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell.
Interestingly enough, Natufians were the first pastoralists and agriculturalists. According to the book The Winds of Change, it reads, the Natufians were a Neolithic culture that extended from modern-day Israel to southeastern Turkey, and around 11,500 years ago, they were among the first peoples to start cultivating grains and domesticating cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs in this landscape, which varied from Mediterranean woodland to scrubland and steppe. And according to the paper titled The Natufian Culture in the Levant, Threshold to the Origins of Agriculture, and it reads, data have led to the recognition that a Natufian homeland existed in the central Levant, and that the Natufians were secondary foragers and perhaps the earliest farmers. This information led to the recognition that the Natufian culture played a major role in the emergence of the early Neolithic farming communities, or what is known as the agricultural revolution. And as we can see according to the paper again, the Natufian culture in the Levant, Threshold to the Origins of Agriculture, and there is a map that shows you the distribution of the Natufian culture, and it is within the Levant, the central Levant, going from Sinai all the way up into modern-day Syria. So again, the Natufians are the world's first pastoralists and agriculturalists, and according to the scriptures, Cain and Abel are the first pastoralists and agriculturalists. But the parallels between the early chapters of Genesis with the Natufians doesn't end there. Another interesting parallel between the Natufians and the early chapters of Genesis is when Noah creates alcohol.
And Noah began to be an husbandman, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine, and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent.
The Natufians were the first to create alcohol. Beer and wine are both ethanol-based drinks. This is from the Smithsonian magazine titled Traces of 13,000-Year-Old Beer Found in Israel, and it reads, since it was discovered in 1956, Rafet Cave, an archaeological site located near Haifa, Israel, has provided vital insight into an ancient group known as the Natufians. The remains of 30 individuals were unearthed there, along with animal bones, tools, and plant impressions, indicating that the Natufians buried their dead on beds of flowers. Now, as Amanda Borcheldan reports for the Times of Israel, scientists have discovered that the Natufians also brewed beer at Rafet Cave, possibly marking the earliest known production of the alcoholic beverage. The Natufians were semi-sedentary foraging people that lived in the Levant between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic periods. It is believed that the Natufians served a vital transitional link between hunter-gatherers and the earliest farming communities in the Near East. Hoping to learn more about this important group, a team of researchers led by Li Lu, an archaeologist at Stanford, recently set out to discover what the Natufians ate. The researchers weren't specifically looking for traces of ancient beer, but that's what they found when they analyzed three 13,000-year-old stone mortars from Levant. The vessels contained starch, residues, and phyllith, microscopic plant particles that are typical in the transition form of wheat and barley to booze, according to Stanford University statement. Liu notes in the statement that the discovery accounts for the oldest record of man-made alcohol in the world. Beer making is typically associated with later agricultural societies. Previously, the earliest known evidence came from northern China some 5,000 years after the Natufians were brewing up beverages at Levant Cave. According to the study authors, the Natufians' production relied on species from 7 different plant families, including wheat, oat, barley, legumes, and bast fiber-like flecks, and likely involved 3 distinct phases. The team's analysis is significant for several reasons. For one, the presence of beer-making equipment at Levant Cave, a burial site, indicates that alcoholic beverages likely played an important ritual function in Natufian culture. The Natufian remains in Levant Cave never stop surprising us. Danny Nadel, study co-author and archaeologist at the University of Haifa, says in his statement, "With the production of beer, the Levant Cave remains provide a very vivid and colorful picture of Natufian lifeways, their technological capabilities and inventions." So again, basically, the Natufians were the very first people to create alcohol, and Noah, according to the scriptures, is the very first man to create alcohol after the flood. So yet again, very interesting parallels between the early chapters of Genesis and the Natufians. Now what brings all of this together is Shem, who is the father of all Semites.
Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam and Asher and Arphaxad and Lud and Aram, and the children of Aram, Uz and Hul and Gether and Mash. And Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. And Joktan begat Almodad and Sheleph and Hazar-Maveth and Jerah, and Hadoram and Uzal and Diklah and Obal and Abimael and Sheba, and Ophir and Havilah and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. And their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest unto Sephar, a mount of the east. These are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations.
According to anthropologists and archaeologists, the Natufians are actually the ancestors of Semites. This is from the book In Hot Pursuit of Language in Prehistory, and it reads, "This paper makes an additional inference, since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant." And according to the paper titled The Prehistory of a Dispersal, the Proto-Afrosan, the Proto-Afro-Asiatic Farming Lexicon, and it reads, "The identification of Proto-Afrosans as Natufians and Post-Natufians seems to satisfy all the 4 criteria. Besides the farming lexicon, there are sets of reconstructed Proto-Afrosan terms pointing to incipient animal breeding, a wide variety of dwelling and settlement types, a territory characterized by both desert and steep forest type of terrain and drying riverbeds, as well as deep permanent streams and vegetation typical of such terrain, and the animals whose bones have been found at the Natufian and early Neolithic post-Natufian sites. Interestingly, there is a large number of common Afrosan terms denoting flocked ungulate animals, usually inhabiting steep and semi-deserts. Finally, The Levant appears to be an attested region from where population began to spread starting in the early Neolithic, covering not only wide tracts of southwestern Asia, but also the adjacent parts of the Mediterranean and Africa. Afrosan and Semitic are one and the same. Semitic, a major branch of the Afro-Asiatic family. Afrosan and Semitic are semantically related. You can use Afrosan instead a noun, Semitic, and Afrosan. Afrosan, a large family of related languages spoken in both Asia and Africa. Semitic and Afrosan are semantically related. In some cases, you can replace the term Semitic with Afrosan. These nouns are similar. Therefore, Semites, or the descendants of Shem, would be Afrosan or Afro-Asiatic peoples, because Afrosan is a large family of related languages spoken in both Asia and Africa, and Semitic is a major branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family. The descendants of Shem, Semites, are an Afro-Asiatic Afrosan people. With that being said, if Natufians are indeed the descendants of Shem and the ancestors of Proto-Semitic populations, perhaps this explains the cultural connections that we see with people such as Cain and Abel and even Noah. Shem would have passed his knowledge of the pre-flood world orally to his descendants. In this case, it would be the knowledge of agriculture and pastoralism. After all, the Natufians were the first agriculturalists and pastoralists. But in our case, with the more biblical model, the Natufians, who would represent the descendants of Shem, would have rediscovered this knowledge after the flood. Scripturally speaking, it seems like Shem was the one to pass down the history. After all, the most accurate accounts and events of our world ended up with the descendants of Shem, most notably the Israelites. With that being said, if Natufians are indeed the ancestors of Semites, this would mean that Semites have their origins in the Levant, which is where the Natufians lived. According to the Bayesian phylogenetic analysis of Semitic languages, identifies an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic in the Near East. It reads, "We estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin, approximately 5,750 YBP, in the Levant, followed by an expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia." So according to the most recent paper detailing the origin of Semitic populations, the Semitic homeland is in the Levant. This is where Semites have their origin, and this is where Semites have their dispersion from. In 4000 BC, Semites would have expanded from the Levant into Mesopotamia and Arabia. And again, the Levant is also the homeland of the Natufians, whom Semites would descend from. So it makes sense that Semites have their origin in the Levant if they're coming from Natufians. And putting all of this together, this would mean that after the flood, Shem would have went to the Levant. Shem would have settled the Levant first, even before the Canaanites. So technically the Levant is the land of Shem.